Having a basic understanding of how facial anatomy, light, and shading all work together is a really important part of your education as a makeup artist. So if you don't understand how like the bones and the muscles and everything works underneath the face, it's going to be really difficult for you to be able to understand how to sculpt the face with makeup. So whether you're trying to make a realistic makeup, if you're just doing like a beauty makeup, if you're trying to age someone, or if you're trying to make someone look non-realistic, it's really important for you to kind of understand how someone's bone structure works. Otherwise, you're not going to really understand where to place different highlights and shadows. It's also really important if you think that you want to get into like special effects makeup to have a good understanding of facial anatomy and even maybe like anatomy for like animals as well, just because you might be getting into like creature design and things like that, and it's going to be really hard to sculpt something if you don't even know what it is that you're sculpting or don't even know where to start. So some of the most important things about someone's bone structure that you would really need to be aware of, I would probably say that like the cheekbones are one of the most important kind of like features on someone's face. So most people, when you're doing a beauty makeup, they like to have their cheekbones like emphasized. If you're doing some kind of like an age makeup, a lot of times the cheekbones, we cave in a lot. And it's just kind of like this central area on someone's face, but a lot of times people misplace contour, they just misplace their shading in that area because they just don't understand how to find someone's cheekbones, so that's really important. The forehead is another really important area of the face, so if you only use like one color on a forehead, it's going to look a little bit off just because foreheads are not flat. They may seem like they're flat when you're just kind of like quickly looking at someone, but the more that you look at someone, you realize that it does have multiple planes. So because it's not just a flat surface, you don't really want to use just one color on it. So that's kind of like the entire idea with applying like makeup to our face, especially in regards to like stage makeup, is that your face is not one flat thing, so you don't want to put makeup on in a way or allow yourself to be seen under lighting that makes it seem that way. You want to make sure that you're retaining all of your dimension and everything that is naturally there. So kind of like another reason why, or more of the reason why you need to understand facial anatomy when you are getting into the world of makeup, is that you're not going to be able to understand how to like make someone look like someone else if you don't really understand why you look the way that you do. So everybody's face has a different like pattern of light that reflects off of it. So if you want to look like someone else, then you need to change that pattern. Otherwise, when you look in the mirror, you're just always going to look the same because your own facial structure is reflecting a certain pattern of light, and that's why you look like you. So if you need to look like someone else, then you're going to need to change up that pattern. So you can do that through three-dimensional makeup, so that's going to be like prosthetics, or even just like smaller like prosthetic additions. It doesn't necessarily have to be like full face. Or you can do that through painting on new highlights and shadows. So the way that light and shade work together helps us kind of see the structure of the face, and it helps us kind of like change that pattern. So if, you know, like I wanted my cheekbones to be a little bit lower or even like a little bit higher, I would need to change the pattern and the way that the light is reflected off my face in order for you to see it that way. So I would have to shade it a lot higher if I wanted to make them look higher, or I'd have to shade it a lot lower if I wanted to make them look lower, and then the rest of it would be highlight. So it's just really important to kind of understand like where these features naturally are in a person, so that way when you're trying to alter them, you kind of know where to start. Because if you don't even know where to start, then you're going to have a really hard time creating a realistic makeup or an age makeup or non-realistic makeup if that's what you're doing as well. A lot of times this relationship between light and shade is called chiaroscuro, and basically that just talks about how light and shade work together to kind of create everything that we see. So you would not see an object if it did not have light on it, and you wouldn't be able to distinguish different objects or different faces or whatever it is if you did not have these different patterns of light and shade happening. A really good way to see this is through an exercise that's in Richard Corson's stage makeup book. So it is basically just a really short little exercise where you would draw a rectangle and a cylinder. And basically this kind of shows you the concept of like hard and soft edges, and how a change in the way that light hits something really makes the object what it is. So if this was like completely black, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between these because you need light to be able to see the difference. But as soon as light hits them, and light can hit them from the exact same light source, you're able to distinguish between them because they have different structures and therefore like different patterns that are going to reflect the light. So if you have two hard edges that come together, so that would be when your like darkest dark hits your lightest light, that's going to give you a really strong contrast, and that's generally going to be when two flat surfaces come together, and that is what's going to give you shapes like rectangles or like a square or any kind of like a more harsh, intense line. And that's when there is not like a gradual change. It's just a very abrupt darkest dark to lightest light. It may fade out from there, but when you really want something to be striking, those are the kind of lines you would use. And then if you have something that's more curved, that's usually going to be a soft edge because that's going to be a really gradual change from the darkest dark into like a mid-tone gray to the lightest light. So the reason that these look different is because they have those different patterns of light. But again, you don't know that until light hits something. So light is really important. Light is the only reason that we see something. But I think that's a great little like exercise to do if you're kind of not understanding this. So how does this all translate to makeup? Basically, all of this translates into highlight and contour. So the more intense we want something to be, generally like the more like value or like more contrast. So value is the relative lightness or darkness of a color, and then the intensity is the relative brightness or dullness of a color. So the further away things get, they tend to get a little bit less intense. So when we're on stage, a lot of times we lose a lot of the color on our face because we're a little bit further away. So that's why we have to add more in order to bring that intensity back. So that's why a lot of times like you have this like great natural shading and highlighting in your face, but once you get on stage and you're at a farther distance, a lot of times you lose that. So this is basically just like stage makeup is just kind of putting that all back. So you're either like emphasizing like your own patterns of light and shade on your face, or you're creating new ones. So every time, just like when we see in those drawings, there is a highlight with a shadow with a highlight, your makeup has to be the same way. So generally if you're in like a beauty makeup or like a corrective makeup like I have on, that's going to be more of like a soft edge, like especially on the cheeks, where everything just kind of like bleeds into each other. Eyeshadow is often like that too. But when we think about like age makeup, usually you have wrinkles that you're drawing on somebody, and you're going to have your darkest dark next to your lightest light, and then they kind of fade out from there, but you still have that really strong contrast between those two colors, and that's what's going to make those really like deep lines and shapes on somebody's face. So it kind of depends on the type of makeup that you have to do. You do use like hard and soft edges in both of them. I think even hard edges can eventually be blended though. I don't think that they have to be just like straight lines on the face, but I just think that it's all about having that really intense like contrast of the lightest light and the darkest dark next to each other. That's what kind of makes it. But basically the way you can translate this like concept of light and shade into makeup is through highlight and contour. One exercise that I really like to do is I have people kind of paint their face all like pink or all purple or just like a non-skin tone color. And then I only have them do highlight and shadow or highlight and contour on one side of their face. And you really see the difference between that, and you can really see, especially if you like step back, you take photos from a distance, it really does make a difference when you add light and shade back in, just because like we talked about in the beginning, your face is not a flat object, so you need to make sure that you're not treating it like one or unintentionally making it one. And I think sometimes when we're just putting on like skin tone colors, it's a little bit harder to see that because it looks a little bit more like normal to our eye. But when you change your color, like I said, to something that's like pink or purple, that's really going to make it so that you understand why highlight and contour is so important. So in theater, they use creams a lot for highlighting and contouring, but you can use powders or liquids, pretty much like anything to do it. The most important thing is that your contour or shading color is going to be at least a couple shades darker than your skin tone, and that your highlight color is going to be a couple shades lighter than what your skin tone is. They need to be in the same undertone that your skin tone is, and generally speaking, like the less like intensity that those colors have and like the less contrast together, the less intense of a look you're going to get. So if you want it to look more natural, and it doesn't have to read at quite a distance, then you don't want the colors to be too dramatically different from your skin tone. But if you really want a lot of contrast, that's when you're going to like, maybe you go 4 shades deeper than your skin tone, or you go 4 shades lighter, or something like that. You want to keep it appropriate and natural for you, but you also have to know that what distance are you going to be seen at? Is it indoor, outdoor? What's the lighting situation like? And that's where you can kind of like go from there and decide what your highlight and shadow colors could be. But hopefully that gives a little bit more insight into why highlight and shadow is so important in theater, and why it's a good idea to just learn a little bit about facial anatomy. You don't have to be an expert on it, but you really just need to be able to figure out where the bones are on somebody's face, and 2, it'll just help you just have a better understanding, especially I think in theater, with all the age makeup that we do, it gives you a better understanding of like how the face might change as well. So, don't just study like your own bone structure. You want to make sure that you're looking at lots of different things, and always looking at a lot of different research photos. So that way you're kind of ready for like whatever project or whoever it is that you have to work on.